Welcome to the Storcast Sit Down. We intend on bringing out the human side of the niche real estate business by asking our guests questions they have been asked and, most importantly, not been asked. Here are your hosts, Steve Baldwin and Andrew Jones.
Always good to see you, bud.
You as well. We have a guest today. Kristen, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. And thanks so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Well, Kristen, wanting to kind of get into it. I know you work for SVN. You probably do a lot of other things. Could you go ahead and kind of introduce us to yourself, to the audience that's watching, and kind of a little bit of your background?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Kristen Wilson-Asman, and I'm a commercial real estate broker. And I specialize in self-storage sales and acquisitions. And I work with SVN, which is a national commercial real estate. Oops, sorry about that. I don't know if I cut out there, but I was receiving a call. Looks like I cut out there for a second. Sorry about that. But I work for SVN, which is the national commercial real estate company. It is the largest in terms of footprint. We have over 200 offices nationwide, and we do specialize in all different product types. It could be hospitality, multifamily, and then we have a self-storage product council. And myself and a co-chair, we are the national directors of the Self-Storage Product Council for SVN. And that's new just within the past few months here. I was just asked to become the national director of the Self-Storage Product Council. I've actually been doing commercial real estate for over 20 years. I started first in property management, and it even goes back further than that. My dad is a commercial real estate agent. So, growing up, I would work summers and Christmas break at, CBRE. And then he was the regional director for Marcus and Millichap. So I kind of followed him from place to place. And then my degree is in accounting. And so I worked for Deloitte for a little while. And then I had an opportunity to move into property management, which is pretty accounting heavy. And then from property management, I started selling a few properties here and there, and mostly multifamily. And then for multifamily, I did that for many, many years, selling apartments mainly. And then it's been maybe like 8 or 9 years ago, my clients who owned apartment complexes, they sold all of their apartment complexes and bought storage properties. So I had to figure out what's this storage thing, it was kind of foreign to me. I'd never sold a storage property. And so I called the SVN National Storage Product Council team, and they interviewed me and kind of trained me and worked with me to kind of get up to speed in storage. And so I've been doing that now about 8 or 9 years, selling just storage properties. I'll still sell some apartments and things here and there because I get referrals, from all the years that I've been in the industry. But I kind of fell in love with storage. I did. I mean, I don't know what it is, but I think, you're selling these apartments and you're going into wet, leaky basements and, just the crazy things that I've seen selling apartment complexes, right? And doing those property tours, and the owners just give you this giant bag of keys, right? And you are like literally like walking over people, like on the floor, in the middle of the floor, you know what I mean? And you're like, oh, and it's a 2-bedroom unit. And I mean, I think like one of my last apartment sales, like I was trying to like hide the bullet holes behind me in the wall. Like it was a bunch of properties, right? And then this one had, for some reason, everybody owned like this giant pit bull, right? And like, I'm not going in that apartment. I'm not doing it. Like the dog's like chewing the door down, I'm like, we're just going to skip that one. You just have to take my word for it. It's a 3-bedroom. Okay. That's, and then I think I had this giant rat. It looked like a cat, like crawled across my foot. Right. And I'm like, I don't know. And then I started selling storage properties, and I was like, oh, I love this, right? Cement slab. You can't show the occupied units, right? Nope, it's locked. we don't own that lock and we can't show it to you, right? We can show you the bank deposit that shows that this person's paying. But that's it, right? You show a couple vacants, a gate code. I mean, you're really looking at the financials and you're looking at also expansion, zoning, things like that. But I just fell in love with it. Now it's a larger footprint because we do sell all across the nation. And I think with multifamily, you're typically selling in your region, but right, we're selling coast to coast storage properties. So that's kind of a big change. You just have a much larger footprint. But I love storage. I fell in love with storage. It's like, it's all I want to sell. And then I bought my first property too. This has been a little bit over a year now. So it took me a while to buy my first storage property. Sometimes it's also because like we would just sell them for so much, because we're trying to get the absolute highest price. If you're a buyer, you're trying to get the lowest price. So it's hard for me to be the buyer, but I ran into a situation where the seller needed an offer that day. And I said, well, I can get you a couple offers. You need an offer, I'll get you an offer, right? Made some calls. And one of my clients I called, he says to me, he goes, Kristen, what are you doing? Like, hang up the phone and make those people an offer. You've been trying to buy storage. You can't buy storage. You've already told them what you could sell it for on the open market. Just tell them what you can pay for it, and right. So that's what I did. I said, listen, I know I can get you more, but I can close this thing in 45 days at this price, and they were so grateful, so, there was not that, you kind of have, there's a legal thing. You really have to make sure when you're a broker that you have disclosed the market value of the property. You cannot come in and offer a lower offer and not, you're considered like you're taking advantage of somebody. That's kind of the rule.
Right.
So you have to sort of say, hey, you could probably get this on the open market, but I this is what I could pay for it, right? And it was great. So it's been really cool. I mean, all the stuff that I've known on paper all these years, seeing, putting into practice, copying lots of things from clients and what they're doing, But anyway, I know you asked me to introduce myself, but that's kind of my background. So yeah, so property management, brokerage, and now also ownership. So
That's great. So, Kristen, kind of what does your day-to-day look like as with your brokerage responsibilities? You have clients calling you looking at it, or do you have more people looking to list right now, or you have still a good amount of clients looking to buy, or a good spread of both?
yeah, that's such a great question. And you don't always know how much to share, like how straightforward to be about these things, right? Because of course we'll work with buyers, right? But the secret of having staying power in a lifetime profession of brokerage is you have to get the listing.
Listing.
There's, 6,000-7,000 buyers in our buyer database. We're getting, my new listing this last week, we've got 7 offers on it, right?
Wow.
The listing is the non-replaceable commodity. That's the thing you have to have in order to stay in the brokerage. All these people want to get involved in, they want to become a realtor, especially when the market's hot, right?
Right.
The real estate classes that are booming, right? They have a waiting list to get into the real estate classes. And I've been doing this, for over 20 years now. So I think just to have staying power in the industry, that's the secret. You have to have the listing. And so everything I do is really about getting storage listings. Now I do have buyers, especially when I get a buyer that calls me and goes, I have a $2 million, $5 million 1031 exchange. I have to declare in 30 days. Probably got, I'm going to try and place them. I'm going to try and place them first on one of my listings. And if I can't, then I'm going to be looking for friendly brokers who will share some of their commission, which is not everybody. You have to figure out who you can share that buyer with, right? And I think, but I don't work a ton with buyers because it's just really hard to build. It's hard to describe, but you'll work with somebody for months and months and months, and then they'll just find something out of the blue, and then they're gone, right? And all that time, it's like all you have you're selling real estate, but really you're selling your time. So it's like you have this many units of time, and there's an opportunity cost anytime you use one of those units of time for something, right? You're exchanging it for something else you could be doing. And so that's my biggest thing. It's just that getting the listing is the most important way to get a paycheck in brokerage.
That's no, it's fascinating to me. And, myself coming from the operational kind of portion of self-storage, I mean, I agree with you. I love self-storage. I love it so much. I'm in
Mm-hmm.
all different types of self-storage, right? Even
Mm-hmm.
the weird
Yeah.
ones. Um, as I talk to a lot of peers, especially at the REITs, like an extra space, they're like, man, I really wish I would
Mm-hmm.
just go out and do this on my own. And maybe like a different firm can third party manage it.
Mm-hmm.
Like I get the operational side, but
Mm-hmm.
if I were just kind of green today and I found you on the internet, I say, oh, Kristen,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at like, this is my price
Mm-hmm.
range. I just don't know what I don't know, but I want to own a self-storage facility.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
how would you kind of guide them through the process? And like, how does that conversation typically go, especially with the first time kind of self-storage buyer?
I get that phone call every day, in fact. And
Wow.
so we kind of come back to maybe multiple times a day. Okay.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
a lot of people, a lot of storage brokers historically would not list properties under $1 million. And
Mm,
I think one of the things I learned and decided to do was that um, big people own all different sized properties, really, right? And then sometimes they purchase their big properties and they're selling their small properties. And if you want to have the opportunity to sell the portfolio or the larger property, you really got to get your foot in the door. And so that
mm,
means this is my personal opinion, okay, is being willing to sell smaller properties. Now, there are a lot more brokers that have entered the field that I see they're doing what we do. They'll list all different size properties, storage properties. Um, but I think that's a great question you're asking. I get that because I list smaller properties in addition to the larger properties. I get that question maybe multiple times a day. Like, hey, I've been really wanting to buy storage. Where do I start? How do I? So I have to be a little bit careful because I could, in a sense, run like free training classes like all day long and never have a paycheck, never have a
right.
sale.
Right.
So I typically just explain a little bit about I do what I recommend. Okay. So you're asking me this question. What do I recommend to people? I do recommend for that first property, paying a little bit of tuition and buying a property that's stabilized. I know that is completely against what every other sort of, master class, little group you join and they say, here's how you find that diamond in the rough, but for whatever reason in storage, there's like three different kinds of properties, right? There's a property that you cannot mess it up. Like no matter what you do, it's gonna lease.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, you look like a genius, but you also just have a really good location.
Right.
And maybe it's not a location that the computer says is a good location, but there's factors that come together that this is a great location. And it is just going to stay full as long as you keep moving out your delinquent units, keep it running, right? And then you've got properties that, given some effort, you can improve them, right? That's what people are looking for. And then you have properties that look like they're properties that you can improve. But no matter what you do, it's not going to go great. You're going to always have a higher vacancy. It could be crime, could be that, what I see a lot, I see people adding to their buy box household income. I see
Mm-hmm.
that a lot lately. Maybe if that's not a part of somebody's buy box originally, they eventually add it because you can have a huge demand for storage, but you can have communities that they really can't afford an extra $50, $100 a month, for storage. And so you're going to have a high vacancy, right? So I think that's so when new buyers call me, I recommend, listen, you're going to have to pay more for that property that's 95% occupied, that seems to be in a great spot. Like you're gonna have to put more down.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Like but that first property, I don't recommend buying the scratch and dent property I don't. I mean, I think you have, I think, but that's again, certainly people have been very successful finding just the right property, but some people have gotten completely in over their head and they're just trying to exit. Smart
Yeah.
business people who own mobile home parks or apartment complexes, and you think, well, why isn't this working, right? And it's just there's some properties you can't turn them around a ton, right? So I think that's what I say. It's to say buy the property that is a well-oiled machine, run it exactly the way the current people are running it. And you're not reinventing the wheel here. I mean, you might be changing out the parts,
Yeah.
but you're not inventing the wheel, right? So you're just going to you might change call center, you might change something, but you're going to just use the same bits and pieces that other people are doing. So yeah, that's my recommendation is buy something that is a well-oiled machine and learn the system from the people who are selling it to you.
I totally agree with that, Kristen. And I mean, I love that because really goes across the board with real estate investing. And, if you
Yeah.
focus on the scratch and dent properties and don't really have that experience or like the construction management know-how, you
Mm-hmm.
could really get caught up in the weeds. One
Mm-hmm.
contractor burns you and eats half of your
Yeah.
budget, and it's a lost cause. And
Yeah.
if you're new and you're moving into this asset class, I feel like focus on the efficiencies. I think that's great. Focus on the efficiencies. Focus on the value add. Don't
Mm-hmm.
focus on replacing every single door and new locks and roofs and
Yes.
massive asphalt projects. Now
Yes.
there's people that might have an appetite for that, but I like what you're saying. Like start small and just focus on those increasing
Mm-hmm.
the NOI. Do you agree, Andrew?
Oh no, yeah. I mean, 100%. I mean, I think as far as, especially like just the little tiny things. I think Kristen, when you're saying like we're all
Mm-hmm.
working with the same parts, but we're kind of replacing some
Mm-hmm.
of them, and
Mm-hmm.
you might find a brand new part, but it's a really, really tiny piece that you can incorporate into that well-oiled machine. Like you don't want to
Mm-hmm.
take on too much.
Mm-hmm.
Especially like here's a whole bunch of random parts and scratch and dent, and let's go ahead and go after it because you're right. There are just some locations that just end up failing, and it's hard to
Mm-hmm.
fail in self storage. And to that point, failure in self storage, and now being a self storage owner, right? I talk
Mm-hmm.
some of the best vendors I talk to in the industry since I've been in this industry are self storage owners themselves because you understand the pain. Like you get it now.
Mm-hmm.
Like you really understand it. So from this last year of being an owner, especially with all the years of brokerage, property management, accounting, like how has that kind of transformed your outlook when you go to talk to buyers or sellers?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that that's a great question. I mean, I think that you know, I love my background. Like I love that I have both the property management and the accounting background. I think that helps me the most. I mean, because just working in property management, you understand the physical systems of the property. You're always getting quotes for you name it. I mean, servicing the elevator, replacing the elevator, or
Hmm.
everything from in fact even a lot more than what's involved in storage, right? I mean, storage is like gutters and doors and things like that. But
Right.
I think that and then the accounting background, I think with commercial real estate, I think people think that commercial real estate is like residential. You're selling a property, and really you're not. You're selling a set of financial statements. I mean, that's
Right.
what you're selling. You're selling a rent roll. That's the
Hmm.
value of that property. I'm not saying that it doesn't have square footage or physical pieces, but the what you can get for it has to do with your rent roll. And so I think for me, having both the accounting and the property management background, it helps me in speaking with sellers, just understanding, what they're looking at from a day-to-day basis in terms of managing their properties, but also working with them to help them get the most out of their property. So, because a lot of people, like you said, Andrew, you said you guys were talking about, people might want to come in, or Steve, take gravel over to asphalt. But the question is, how does that improve your gross income?
Mm.
Everything comes back to gross income. We can get some pro forma on properties. We used to be able to get a lot more. We used to be able to say, hey, look at that patch of dirt. You could park a truck there. So you can't have that patch of dirt. You can't have that patch of dirt for free. It's these buildings plus that patch of dirt. You have to pay for that patch of dirt. We
Sure.
just could get all this sort of pro forma around the edges, and we can still get a little bit of it on a property that's maybe a lease up deal or slightly distressed. We can sometimes get a little bit of lift, but the net income and the gross income is everything in property valuation. You can't, paving it, if it doesn't increase your gross income, then it's sort of useless, right? Everything comes to, in apartments, I remember people would buy them and they'd say, oh, we replaced all the windows, right? Like, well, I don't know. The windows before they closed, they opened, they locked. I don't know if they increases your rent, right? Okay, it's kitchens and bathrooms, and those are the things that increase your rent, right? And with storage, you have to really think about, is this going to increase my rent? That improvement. And so I think talking to sellers, helping them understand, not necessarily focusing in on improvements, focusing in on gross income, okay, getting all the historical tenants to pay market. And they don't necessarily always want to do that, right? I mean, when you're managing something day to day and you have long-term tenants, they might be paying a little bit less, but they're not moving, So I think that's just using that background, the financial background, property management background, that helps me a lot in the industry. But we do a lot of counseling of sellers to help them get to a place. Maybe it's not time to sell it today. Here's what you need to do to get max value for your property.
Man, that's a great transition, actually. I was, in residential, here are the things you can do to prep your house for a sale.
Mhm.
Are there any tips there that you like to speak with a seller, trying to, clean some things up, get rid of some overhead maybe, and maybe some physical
Mhm.
improvements as well?
Yeah, you can, if you have CapEx that's going to impact your value. So the value of your property is 5 million, but all of the roofs need to be refurbished. Okay, all of the
Mm,
bolts are leaking. Right. Okay, that's an example that a buyer is going to subtract that from the price. So I think things that are broken, okay, that can be something that takes from your price.
mm,
I'm not sure curb appeal is necessarily a major value add, right? I think the biggest thing for sellers, if there's a major CapEx thing that you're not going to get around it, right? That's something, but the biggest thing you can do is gross income. So what I see sellers doing is they'll reduce their expenses, like, oh, well, we got the expenses down here and we got the expenses. So now the value of my property is higher. That's just not necessarily the case because the private owners are operating at a expense percentage lower than what the large acquisition buyers are operating at. They're
mm,
adding a regional manager. So it doesn't really matter what your expenses are that much, right? Because the buyer is typically owns multiple properties. They know what their expenses are. Your insurance, your property taxes, those are the two major expenses they want to know.
Mm-hmm.
And then they've got their own internal underwriting. And I think that I think reduction of expenses is not where you want to spend your time. I think you can do some CapEx projects, but mostly you just want to drive your gross income up. If there is a
mm.
spot in the back lot where you can put 10 trucks, but you never did, put in the RVs, put in
Right.
whatever that is everything. It's just gross income. It is a rent roll that you're selling. It's a cash flow stream you're selling. So you can't decreasing expenses doesn't help you as much as increasing income.
That's great.
That's, I mean, that's honestly so. I mean, personally, this is great for me to hear because I'm in the ancillary income kind of world of self storage. And to hear
Hmm.
somebody like yourself saying, look, it's what the property's gross income is worth. And if you can
Hmm.
add in those extra spaces or the
Hmm.
tenant insurance
Hmm.
or whatever the hell it
Yep.
might be.
Yes.
So you're pretty much
Yes.
saying, like, you really focus on that if you're looking at selling a property or
Yep.
just, having a property in general.
Hmm. And when you list a property and you're in contract, the income has to stay stable or go up. That's one of the biggest things I talk to sellers about. Like sometimes sellers will want to list a property at the end of summer. We get that a lot because they've had their biggest income months and they're like, oh, this
Mm,
is a great time to list.
Correct. Yeah.
Well, then the income goes down during the contract period, and that is challenging to overcome. I mean, sometimes you end up with a price adjustment from, so it's kind of funny. So when I get a listing or I have a property in contract, I'm literally the last couple of days of the month calling the seller going, hey, how's it going? It's the last few days of the month. I think you want to make those delinquency calls. Okay. Let's get that. Like, how's your income looking? Right. We can't have the income drop off. The income drops off. And yeah, that's just very stressful when the income changes during the listing and contract period. So again, it's so funny. I remember one property, the seller gave me access to their software system. And I said, is it okay if I call some of these renters, these delinquent renters? So I'm calling delinquent renters because I
Wow.
have this property in contract and we're down like, I don't know how many thousands of dollars down in gross income we were for the month. I was like, oh no, this doesn't work. Right. So I'm calling their renters. I'm like, hey, you need to get that rent in right now. Like, I don't know if they appreciated that, but we got more rents in. It dropped down a little bit, but not as much as it was about to. So, and we got the property closed, but it's just this funny things, right? The sellers are typically really worried about, I don't know, like weeds or something. And,
Yeah.
gross income. That's all I'm worried about. I'm just worried about the income. Now they will, those ancillary cash flow. And I will say sometimes the market might give a different cap rate to different income streams.
For sure.
Now, when we sell a property, we say, hey, that car wash income or that U-Haul income or whatever it is, we say that's the same cap rate as the storage, right? But the offers will come in different, right? You'll come in, our goal, we'll typically find at least one person or two groups where they'll value those ancillary incomes at the same level as the storage income, but not all of the groups will. Right. They might put a different cap rate on some of those ancillary streams, especially U-Haul, right?
I have a follow-up question to that because I'm very interested now on the cap rate side of things because I didn't know
Mm-hmm.
this, right? Just being
Okay.
an operator.
Mhm.
When it comes to, let's say I added like you said, like the 10 parking spaces in the dead
Mm-hmm.
space or like anything that's technically like a rental income that you're adding units, like maybe it's like
Mm-hmm.
the mobile units like Boxwell or whatever,
Yeah.
would that affect the cap rate versus like a U-Haul ancillary income?
So the Boxwell units, we treat them just like it's regular square footage.
Okay.
Regular income, regular square footage. Again, there's just so many buyers out there. Not all of the buyers will treat Boxwell square footage at the same value as traditional
Hmm.
square footage. But it's
Okay.
changing, honestly, more and more, it's just treated like regular square footage. We have more people willing to accept that. It's also a lending question too, right? Lenders, if you do a survey, how much real square footage do you have, right? How
Right.
much of it's mobile that's all that question, right? We were looking at listing a property. Our client was going to buy it and flip it, right? And it was all, um, the truck trailers. Now they were very nice. They were all painted to match
Mm-hmm.
and those types of things, right? Is it bolted to the ground? Is it not bolted to the ground? Are they attached together? Are they zoned? Are they not zoned? I mean, it's just all those kind of questions, right? But from a listing perspective, we just kind of with a very straight face, without blinking, tell the market, I don't know what you're talking about. It's square footage. It's storage
Yeah.
square footage. It's all the same. It's the same as that building in the back. That's how we treat it for the brokerage community. And we can usually find the right buyer for it, right? But
That's awesome.
it's certainly the more untraditional, the less traditional something is, you'll have more detractors, than you will otherwise.
Oh,
Have you
but
found that
that's
to be an issue with different finance sources? Like, let's say
Yes.
like a SBA type product,
Hmm.
they would kind of frown on the portable, the relocatable units.
Yeah, I mean, that's the question is,
Mm.
we have properties that have to have a cash buyer for one reason or another, and that reduces your probability. So this is all probabilities. The more buyers you have, the higher the probability of an easy lending, and so what puts constraints on that probability? Pro forma, pricing, right? It doesn't mean you can't get it. You're just reducing the number of buyers and lenders. You're reducing your probability. And it's the same thing now. We haven't had a lot of issues with selling. We haven't had any issues with selling boxable units, right? And financing with those.
Good.
We haven't had issues. Now it depends with the trailers. If they're just up on blocks in the back of the property,
Yeah.
but it's not usually very much square footage. We're talking like one section or the small square footage. So you can usually, again, your gross income, and as long as you have enough real square footage, that combined with your gross income, you'll be fine. But if you have all portable units, it's like
Right.
financing that, right? But some of these box bills, I mean, this is an interesting tax. You can write off a lot more in year one. So then there's a tax, strategy there too, right? So it's an interesting question, but it's really just probabilities, really.
This is honestly blowing my mind, especially on the cap rate side. I mean, that is so cool. Something I just didn't personally know about.
Mhm.
But Steve, I didn't know if you have any more questions, or Kristen, or if you had anything else to kind of add. But gosh, we really appreciate your time.
Well, I'd love to hear, Kristen, if you wanted to tell us a little bit more about SVN. I know
Mhm.
it's national, and you're able to
Mhm.
co-op with SVN agents
Mhm.
in other states, right?
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, it's cool. So SBN, how did it come to be? It's newer than some of the other brokerage companies, but not, I mean, I don't want to say 30, 40 years now, but SVN came about. There was one broker who had a listing, and then there was a broker who worked for a different competing company that had the buyer. And both of their companies told them that if they connect that buyer and seller, it's grounds for dismissal
Huh.
from the commercial brokerage company. And you think, well, that's crazy. That's illegal, right? You have a listing, you're supposed to sell it to the highest buyer. And, does the seller know this is happening, right? But it sounds like that's strange, but that is not the exception. That is the rule of thumb in commercial real estate. And so those two guys started SVN. And the idea is that we are going to share our fees with our competing brokers. In the commercial real estate industry, only about 20% of deals involve cooperating brokerage splits, which
Wow.
seems like so small, right? Then SVN is the exact opposite. 80% of our deals involve cooperating brokerage splits. And it's true to some degree in the short run, we might make less fees, but in the long run, we're selling properties average of 8 to 10% higher than our competitors. And so
Wow.
I'm just very fortunate. I'm at a point now where a lot of people in commercial real estate do a lot of cold calling, for listings. And we're just really fortunate, I think, because we just get so many referrals, so much referral
That's
business
great.
from this. And we, I get a call every week, somebody saying, "Hey, we're thinking about listing our storage property," right? And that comes from just doing it a long time, right? Of course. And
Hmm.
but also I think that the SVN network, that message is out because we have even competing brokers from a different company that maybe they've got a huge buyer, right? A cash buyer. They may be concerned about even getting paid on bringing it to a listing in their own brokerage shop in terms of getting a paycheck on that. But they know that if my name's on it, if SVN's name is on it, they're going to get paid for that buyer because I want to sell the listing for the highest price that I can get for the seller. That is my job. And I'm happy to do that. I'm happy to share my fees with other brokers. And so we have competing brokers that follow our listings because they know they'll get paid,
That's great.
So it's an interesting, yeah, it's really interesting. So yeah, so I love SVN. I've been with SVN for a long time now. I was started in property management and switched over to brokerage. And right about then is when SVN approached our company about becoming their Columbus, Ohio company. We were Horizons Real Estate. And
Okay.
so I've been with SVN about 20 years. Um, so I
Great.
really appreciate the company. And then it's just grown and grown and grown. And now we're growing internationally as well. But we
Hmm.
do, because in addition to cooperative brokerage and sharing with our competing brokers, we have 2,000 agents nationwide. So every Monday we have a broadcast call where we share with each other, here's our new set of listings with all of the agents nationwide. So I do get a lot of buyers from our SVN network alone. So I feel like it's great because I have these tools I can offer sellers. It's not just one approach, right? We're on 15 different syndication channels. Plus I have the SVN. Plus I have the cooperative brokerage. So I feel like what I always tell sellers is I think we've picked the right price here for your property, but I know for a fact that when we're done listing your property, we will know what the market will pay for your property. It may not be, strong enough for you to sell it at this time, but you'll know what the market will bear because we're not just sending it to our buyer database. That's what everybody does. They just send it to their buyer database. But we're doing all the things you're supposed to do. We're doing a full service listing of the property plus marketing to our competing brokers on day one. So that really, I think for the sellers, you can feel confident that your property has seen all the eyes it can see. These are the offers that are coming in. You're not wondering, did I miss something?
Right.
Yeah. Well,
that's awesome.
Kristen, where can we find you? Anybody listening to this podcast or watching this podcast, email, website, all that fun stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have our national email, obviously, which is www.svn.com. And then we have a storage, a brokerage as well, which is selfstoragesales.com. So all of our national self-storage team is selfstoragesales.com. And then also you can email me, kristen.asman@svn.com. And anyway, I love storage for all the reasons you guys love storage. I think the people are also partially what make it so great. Like it's just a very collaborative environment. People are happy to share best practices. And I think people genuinely like to, talk to other people about storage,
Right.
That's true. Well, Steve Baldwin.
Andrew Jones.
Kristen, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you so much
Appreciate
for
your
having
time,
me.
Kristen.